Welcome to the Afghanistan Project Podcast. I'm your host, Beth Bailey, and I'm excited to be here with two of my favorite return guests, Bill Roggio and Will Selber. You guys have probably heard their backgrounds before, but we're going to go into that now because why not? Bill Roggio is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and he edits the Foundation's Long War Journal, which has done some of the most thorough and amazing open source reporting on the global war on terror's various fields of conflict throughout Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. Bill is also a veteran of the U.S. Army and New Jersey National Guard, and he spent time embedded with U.S. and Iraqi forces in Iraq during 2008 and with the Canadian Army in Afghanistan in 2006. I feel like at this point, Will, I actually don't need to read your bio because you've been on approximately a quarter of the episodes of this podcast.
Man.
But, we all love Will. He is a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force and grumpy combat veteran all over the place. Bulwark, freaking in the Long War Journal himself today. It came out today.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm just accompanied by two amazing people, and I don't know what the hell I'm doing here, but thanks for coming on, guys.
Always a pleasure.
Oh, thanks, Beth. And yeah, no, listen, Will is such a catch. We had to get him writing for the Long War Journal. Can't let that one go.
I appreciate that. Dream come true. Captain, like I tell Bill every time, Captain Selber, wherever he is, he's pinching himself. You're going to write for the Long War Journal. No, you're not. You will. Oh, for true.
Well, it's
sure.
well deserved and earned.
Thank you. I appreciate that
story. Well, I have you guys here today to talk about what we all think are some pretty devastating topics, but that seem to kind of be flowing underneath a lot of the other outrageous things that are going on in the world today. And so those are the various terror groups working in Afghanistan, what current state they're in, and outside Afghanistan too. And to get started, Bill, I'd love you to talk about your latest observations about is it Saif al-Adil in Long War Journal and what he is calling the faithful to do right now.
Yes, Saif al-Adil, he is the man who we believe leads Al-Qaeda. We're pretty much certain about it. Al-Qaeda never announced his succession after Zawahiri was killed. There's some reasons for that. One of them is they didn't want to embarrass the Taliban or make things difficult for the Taliban as it works to get recognized internationally. The Taliban said it wouldn't allow Al-Qaeda to reestablish itself, but Zawahiri's death there makes it troublesome. And the other reason is that he lives in Iran. He's based out of Iran, and that would be used by the Islamic State and as fodder. So him being the leader makes things uncomfortable for Al-Qaeda itself. But within the last couple of weeks, an official publication, As-Sahab, which is Al-Qaeda's official propaganda or media branch, whatever you want to call it, and he called for people across the world to come to Afghanistan to get training and experience and instruction before they move on to wage jihad against what they said, quote, the Zionists, end quote, as well as Westerners and Americans. He encouraged attacks in the West. So this is significant for several reasons. Look, Al-Qaeda wants to insert itself into the Israel conflict. It always has. I mean, one of its first declaration of war was against the Crusaders and the Jews, with the title of the fatwa, or the religious edict that they put out to justify their actions. And that was, I believe, in 1996. So, but they've had trouble. Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, they dominate that scene. But they always use it. But I think Al-Qaeda is serious. And what makes this really dangerous here is that Al-Qaeda has the ability to make this happen if they could get people in country and then get them back out. Because since the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda has established a significant, I would call it terrifying, infrastructure across Afghanistan. This is according to the United Nations Analytical Support and Sanctions and Monitoring Team. In 2 successive reports, and they're going to have one coming up in the next month. I'm really looking forward to reading that. It's really, for us terrorism geeks, it's top-notch material. But what it says, the Al-Qaeda is running training camps in 10 of Afghanistan's 34 provinces. I note that the provinces of Paktia, Paktika, and Khost in eastern Afghanistan, which is Haqqani territory, is not listed as having training camps. And those of us who know Afghanistan and know Al Qaeda and the Taliban go, well, Al Qaeda is certainly running camps there. No, that's not a knock on the UN. They're going off information they receive from their sources and from foreign governments. It just hasn't been reported. But I will tell you, I am certain there were camps there when U.S. forces were based in Afghanistan. Will, I'm sure, can go into more detail on that. Madrasa, or religious schools, in 5 provinces. Safe houses in at least 4 provinces, including in Kabul, the capital, where Zawahiri was killed. So before the UN report came out, we knew they had a safe house there. The Taliban was running it for Al Qaeda's Amir. A weapons storage depot in Panjshir province, of all places. That is both a strategic location for Al Qaeda, and it keeps Al Qaeda in Panjshir to fight any remnants of the the National Resistance Front. I'm going all 1999 with the National or Northern Alliance. But, and, so that keeps Al Qaeda there to fight any remnants there, as well as it's a well-fortified province. It's a mountainous province that's difficult to get in and out, and also a media operations center. So if Al Qaeda can get people in, they have the infrastructure to train them, and then they can use their allies, Pakistan, Iran, possibly. I mean, I think it'd be dangerous for the Russians to do it, but if they really wanted to get under our skin and they had promises not to conduct attacks in Russia and its allies, the Russians or the Chinese could help them get out. This is something, it's very concerning. We have reports of terrorists crossing the border now. 8 Islamic State fighters recently were arrested in, I believe it was Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and New York City, coming through that open border in the south. Al Qaeda certainly can take advantage of that. But again, they have the training and they have the state sponsorship. The Taliban largely controls Afghanistan. Yes, the Islamic State has small pockets, but the Taliban can enforce its will when it chooses to do so, when it chooses to mass its forces. And it is an ally of Al Qaeda. The last United Nations that monitoring team report said that the relationship between Al Qaeda remains strong. That was in February of this year. I'm certain that the next report that comes out will say the same thing.
I don't know, Bill. I think maybe I think it's time. It's the Taliban's time to become the effective counterterrorism partner that we've always hoped they could be. And if we wish upon a star and we just project our values and how we think upon them, then somehow they will magically become that.
Yeah. I mean, hope 3 years later. Yep. They're just going to tear down that infrastructure that they laid out. The best
part about it, though, is that I don't know if you guys – that was amazing, by the way. I learned so much in just that stream of consciousness. They're having a Doha 3. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just find that to be – they're going to have the Doha 3. It's like a movie. I didn't like the second one or the first one. Yeah. So I don't want the I don't want
Nobody asked for this sequel, Will.
Right. Nobody did. And I'm just like – What are we doing there? Like, what's going on? Like, what's the point of this? Haven't they proven repeatedly that they didn't and never will abide by the Doha Agreement?
We were bent over the conference table in Doha twice. What makes us think it's not going to happen a third time? Yeah, we didn't want this. I mean, what makes us think that we can trust them the third time around? Look how this has developed. It's amazing. The Taliban is treated as a unsophisticated, sandal-wearing, towel-head desert dwellers and mountain dwellers, and they beat us at the negotiating table because we wanted to be beat. I wanted to make one more quick point about Saif al-Adil in his statement. And what that says, too, is that both al-Qaeda and the Taliban are confident enough in their position within Afghanistan that they can just flip us all the bird and say, yeah, we're here. Come on over here and train for your attacks in the West.
Mm-hmm. With their perfect government. I love that one. It's like, oh, Jesus.
It's perfect to them.
Perfect. Exactly. And that is so clear because anytime you get a Taliban apologist on, X, they're like, no, it's amazing. No, it's really amazing here. It's like, oh yeah, the women are they loving it? The women are loving it? Yes, they're safe. It's like, Well, that's new to me. I don't think you can be safely raped in prison, actually.
I love to safely be stoned and beheaded
Right.
in public.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great over there. It was
What could possibly go wrong?
No, could possibly go wrong. I mean, but if we just continue to talk to them, if we just sit down and we can reason with them. Look, I don't think you understand what we can do for you. We have McDonald's and we have Walmart, and we can give that to you, and then maybe you'll stop killing us. And they will do this, because I've seen them do it at various different levels in my combat experience. They will take that money, thank you for it, and then kill you with it. Am I wrong?
Right.
No, this is.
I was on I did 2 years on a provincial reconstruction team,
Yep.
Bill. One in Iraq as a State Department led provincial reconstruction team in Diyala, and then one in Afghanistan. And they were just problematic things. And I understand the good nature behind them. I get it. I loved it. It was fun, like soccer balls and hospitals and stuff like that. That's great. But first you have to take care of the situation. It can't go first and then the second. I
can recall raids. I remember one particular instance. I don't remember the specifics of the year where it occurred, but it was in eastern Afghanistan, and they killed a couple of Taliban fighters, and I think they killed a couple of family members. And they wound up handing tens of thousands of dollars to the family members of Taliban. Mm-hmm. And people are like, but they were Taliban. And they're like, yeah, but it's the right thing to do. Where do we think that money went? I'm sure you saw that a million times.
Oh, all the time. All the time.
I mean, of course they don't respect us. Of course they go to the negotiating table and say, oh yeah, we got there right where they want us, because all they want to do is give us things with no real conditions.
None.
What about women this time around? I know that there were some big headlines about whether or not women were going to be included in DOA 3. Do either?
I don't know if they're going to. I'll be honest with you. As soon as I see something about that, I just say, oh, it's going to happen at this date. I don't care anything else about it. Noted. Sure, you're going to talk about inclusion. I don't know. Do you know, Bill?
I don't. I mean, and if they do, so what? It would be window dressing.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for which Gitmo detainee and which specially designated global terrorist that they send to also put that finger in our eye as well. I mean, as soon as nearly every, remember the Taliban 5 who were exchanged for Bo Bergdahl. Yep. I think 3 or 4 of them, if not all of them, were involved in the Doha negotiations. And they were there not because of their prowess in negotiating. These were military commanders and butchers. They were there because it was a direct insult leveled at us. And we were so stupid that we didn't even recognize it. Or if we did, we didn't care. I mean, look, we might as well just put the GIMP mask and the GIMP suit on and jump in the GIMP box. And, let the Taliban let us out when we want and lead us around by a leash. At this point, I hate to be so graphic about it, but this is what these negotiations really turn out to be.
So I was in Afghanistan the last year. I got there in June of 2020, and I saw the entire all the way up until 6 weeks before, right? And you saw those. I would talk with the negotiators, the Afghan negotiators, right, all the time, and they're like. They're doing nothing. All they're doing is stalling and haggling over the smallest words so that y'all will continue to put pressure on us to give them more things. This is every Afghan I talk to. They're like, it's not going to do anything. You're going to keep on giving them stuff. And it was, so what did we do? We're like, listen here, Afghans. What we need you to do is release 5,000 of the Taliban, and then you cannot do offensive operations. However, we have something behind door number 2. You're going to love it. It's called, get ready, active defense. You'll love it. It's the best. I listened to this brief by some brilliant British officers. I mean, they were brilliant. They had great accents and they were smart. That PowerPoint thing did wonders. I was like, you spent a long time on that. And it was this concept of the Afghans that they would never They're like, we're going to hold here. They're going to do this and this. I'm like, the Afghan local police are going to do that? I've never seen them do that down there. I've been in Kandahar, and like they can't fight like that. It's not. And I asked this question to them. I was like, what do the Afghans think about this plan, this active defense, since they can't do offensive operations? This is a quote. I wrote it down in my journal of quotes. Yeah, well, they're going to have to really wrap their mind around it. It's going to blow their, it's going to be different for them. I'm like, well, that's a good thing in the final year of the war, to give them something brand new they've never done before. I'm sure that will go swimmingly.
Mm-hmm.
Swimmingly.
Yeah.
The amount of arrogance that went into all of the things,
We know best.
If you read, so General Miller and Zalmay Khalilzad, right, who was the special representative for whatever, Afghanistan reconciliation. General Miller obviously was the last
former ambassador.
Yep, yeah, Khalilzad, right, ambassador to Iraq and Afghanistan. So they both did one of those lengthy testimonies, closed door testimonies, but they released the actual testimony. I read both of them, over 200 pages each. And it's quite telling. Khalilzad is very, very clear that he was given a job to do, which was to leave Afghanistan, to cut a deal with the Taliban to leave Afghanistan. And that was what he was going to do, hell or high water. That's what he had to do. I would love to put him under truth serum to find out if he actually believed it or if he just was cynically following it through. I suspect the latter, but I suspect at some point he probably lied to himself and thought that it might work. And General Miller is I don't think I've ever read anything by a 4-star who sounded like a specialist. He was like, I was given orders and I executed them. And I was like, well, I passed information up the chain of command, that it wasn't going to work. And I'm like, you're a 4-freaking-star general. I also felt sorry for him. You could tell he cared.
Yes.
But he was not the man for the job at the end of the day. Someone needed to stand up and say the Afghans weren't capable of doing active defense. The Afghans were going to collapse and not just run it up the flagpole to the chain of command and when these crazy policies come down. He needed to fight his way to talk to the Secretary of Defense, to the Commander-in-Chief, because it mattered. But you know what? He got.
What the Afghans call Zalmay Khalilzad? Watan Faroush, which means the seller of the country.
Yeah.
Watan Faroush. And you know what? I never met a single Afghan, not one, and I know a couple. In the final year, they were like, that was a really good pick. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
We like him. Never heard that once.
Yeah.
One time.
And the funny thing is when he testifies, he describes himself as what I would call the magic Afghan, right? He was the Afghan that can do anything, right? That's what President Trump thought of him. That's what President Bush thought of him when he appointed him ambassador. That's what General Miller described him as. Right? Like, Khalilzad knows everyone's this, and he could do, magical Afghan Taliban, right? That's
Did I tell you about, I've had so many conversations recently, but when we would have the daily update brief or whatever, right? And whatever, I would sit in on him in the embassy. And behind General Miller's his briefing thing was words have meaning, something like that. Words matter, which is fine, great. I love it. Be precise with your words. Some of the words that were on there were like significant, level the bubbles, leaders forward. And it was amazing to watch because you would see like different catchphrases, leaders forward, trusted Afghans. And like somebody would start saying it and then it would just circle around the entire command structure. Somebody once, a 2 or 3-star general, said the word significant in a briefing, and immediately was like, "Oh my God, that's not what I meant to say. I meant this other thing." And I'm like, "Who cares? Like, what are you? They had a weekly shura. There was a weekly shura where they brought in all the Afghans and they synchronized and they coordinated. And they put up the PowerPoint slides. And the big achievement that last year was that the Afghans were doing it on their own. And I could listen to a lot of these Afghans and they're like, this is nothing. This isn't how we do this. But we forced that on them into our way of thinking about the fight. And people don't understand that because they weren't there. But like it wasn't just General Miller's resolute support. I don't mean to just cast that at that. I was in part of many units that had that same issue, and it plagued us the entire time.
Look, it goes to the beginning. I mean, we forced a government on them that wasn't appropriate for Afghanistan. We forced a military on them that wasn't appropriate for what they can do and what they needed and how they should fight. And so it's just completely unsurprising that, by year 17, 18, 19, 20, we were forcing and had unrealistic expectations and goals for the Afghans. I mean, looking back, I mean, this war, I still think things were salvageable, and I still think we could have been in a situation where the Taliban, where the Afghan government could have survived, even if in part. However, we set ourselves up for failure. We set the Afghans up for failure almost 2 decades ago.
So, Bill, has there been? I'm so sorry, Beth. This is your show.
Go ahead.
I'm so sorry.
You go ahead, Will.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Here's my question: has there been any testimony about what happened? Like, what was the messaging between the Biden administration and the Taliban during the final weeks of the war? Because I just want to know why we stopped bombing them.
I haven't seen it. I know State Department officials have been asked about things like that, but I haven't I haven't read every testimony that has come out, because sometimes it's a official, and I'm honestly more interested in what Miller, but the reality is that Deputy Assistant Secretary of State or, the Deputy Chief Attaché may have more information or more understanding, or maybe willing to spill the beans more than a high-level official. But if it's out there, I just haven't seen it. Now, I know that the Senate is doing an Afghanistan commission, but don't hold your hopes up for that. People on that unfortunately, that commission has people in it were on it that were involved in decision making and policy directly involved, and you're never going to get the truth that way. These people, this is going to be a CYA affair from beginning to end, and it's going to be everyone's fault and no one's fault.
Nobody will ever be held accountable, because that's not what we do.
It was bound to happen. What could we have done?
It was the Afghans' fault. They're to blame. Yeah. You know what our favorite thing to say about our allies is? It's the best thing. I love it. It's my favorite thing. They were corrupt.
Yeah. Unlike us.
Right. Not us. We understand your situation. Come. I've never been there before, but I have what you need. And the problem, Bill, I mean, like, it was just, you got guys in, they're great Americans. They're great at their job, but they didn't understand Afghanistan. And by the time they started to understand it, they left. And then there was another one. And then there was another one. And then there was another.
And the Good Idea Ferry.
Right. And I would tell the Afghans, I was like, the first thing I would ask them when I would have a conversation, how many of me have you seen in your life? Which one am I? And they would be like, you're the 10th. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. Because I remember talking to one, and it's like, what is I was like, how are you doing, ma'am? She's like, I'll be honest with you. She was a female Afghan commander. She said, I spend half my time talking to you people because there's so many of you and you all want to talk to me and I can't ever do my job.
And talk about corruption, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so they were taking money and misusing it. Well, who was handing it out?
It's exactly
who wasn't
right.
providing oversight for that money? I mean, being a drug addict, it's a two-way street. There's a drug dealer involved as well. And, we thought that we can buy our way out of problems in many instances, and never took into account the corrupting influence that we brought with us. I mean, it's well-intentioned, but we still got that result, and we have to take accountability for that.
We must.
Yeah, I want to see Cigar do the.
Listen, right? That's a great point, Beth. That is if anyone does, you know what, the after action report for Afghanistan has already been done. Cigar has already done this. This is going to be a waste of time and money and a dog and pony show and jobs for people. And people put their name on some blue ribbon panel, and it's going to tell us nothing that you or Will or I don't know, Beth.
Yeah. But it's like,
I just want you to know that before I started talking to Bill about, there was a point where I met some of the people on the Afghan Commission, and I was like, they have an Afghan Commission, Bill, and he was like, "Here's your hope, Will, and I'm gonna pour it down the drain." And I'm like, "Not again." No, Bill, you told me this when I was in Afghanistan too. I would log on to Log War Journal. Captain Will Selber he read it all the time.
Sorry, Captain Will.
It's okay. And I would be like, you know what? Hey guys, I'm hearing there's an uprising up in this province. And I would wait for Bill to get wind of it. And, I'd be like, maybe a month, and then he'd come out, he's like, yeah, it's not going to do anything. I'm like, no.
I'm that guy.
All here, though, it's because we're all still hopeful, even though it's absolutely batshit at this point, right? We all still care so much that we want to see it, and that is, like you say, well, to come back full circle, it's what was missing, and so many of the people who didn't understand and couldn't. It's a big topic to understand. It's very intricate and detailed, and it's. Yeah, the deployment cycle, all these things. That's the thing, is all of this stuff came together to make this very difficult problem that let's move forward to now, because okay, the withdrawal happens, everything goes to crap, and the Taliban take over, and all these bad things continue to happen, and we continue to give them millions of dollars every week. But Will, your latest about Siraj, I want you to talk about your connection to Siraj, and then also his latest escapades. As I've been saying it, Siraj does Hajj.
Siraj does Hajj. Siraj at the Hajj. Yeah, so I know him, and I know some of his guys. There were not a lot in Kapisa, but there were some. There was some of some of his guys, and you can put that guys as just Taliban, because this is Sergeant Haqqani, I'm sorry, the deputy emir of the Taliban, the head of the Haqqani network. He's a globally designated terrorist. Did I say that correctly, Bill? He's one
especially
of the
designated global terrorists, but it's all the same thing. Yes.
Yeah, that's the right terminology. Everybody has agreed that this man is bad and he shouldn't be traveling anywhere. We've all come to consensus, people.
The United Nations, even. I mean,
yes. For God's sakes. And then all of a sudden I woke up and I saw on my feed, he's in the UAE. I'm like, huh? How does that happen? How did Siraj get to the UAE? And what is he doing there, pray tell? And it's not like it was some type of backdoor thing, or hey, all right, let's figure something out. He got the road, he got the treatment. Here's the state-run television shaking the president's hand. We're working together. He's a statesman. I'm like, oh, look at you. You're now the Minister of Interior. Hey, look at that. And so, he's also the Minister of one of his many hats is Siraj's, where he can do that. He can put on one hat and take off the other one. So now he went there as the Minister of Interior. But the fun part, the best part, of course, is I was like, I wonder where he'll go next, because they usually just want to brag about this type of stuff, and rightfully so. I would too. Then I saw him live streaming his time at the Hajj, and I was like, he's in Saudi Arabia too? Why is he there? And why is all of these people there with him? Some of them who are already on that as well, the same special list. And I'm just like, oh my God. Because here's the thing, we can all just be like, what's he doing? But I'm also, I'm a former commander. And, if there was a guy like that within 100 miles of my airmen, I want to know about it. Because those are my airmen, and their mamas and daddies put them under my care. So I really hope that the Expeditionary Wing commanders were informed of that, and their Office of Special Investigations was formed of that, so that their security posture was ready for something like that. because that would be the type of questions that I would want to know. Because when you put somebody like that near Americans, you're playing a dangerous game. You're playing a dangerous game. That man has killed over 2,000 Americans. We can split hairs on if he's Taliban, Haqqani, oh my, this, that. No, 2,000 Americans, over almost 1,000 of our European and non-European allies who fought with us for 20 years, and 70,000 Afghan security force members and hundreds of thousands of Afghans. But other than that, he's an up-and-comer. He's got middle management written all over him. He's the type of guy. Look, people, we can do business with this man. We're gonna give him the McDonald's, and then he'll stop killing us.
I remember a report from it was General Lynch, and there was a British general, and they wrote this report. Oh, the Haqqanis, they're just pragmatists. They're not in this for the jihad. They're not, and I remember writing up some scathing, like, you don't know the Haqqanis. And so at that point in time, Siraj actually was an up-and-comer, right? His father was the head of the Haqqani network. Siraj's first designation was or reward put out for him was for $75,000. I think it's now either it's $10 million out for him. Will, if I was the commander of a squadron, I'd be tempted to dial up a little strike and just pay the consequences for it later. That would get Lieutenant Colonel Bill Roggio thrown.
How happy I would have been,
and it would have been goddamn worth it.
You know how happy I would have been. Here's the thing: I was talking to one of my combat veterans friends. He was like, "Imagine if this just would have been a ploy, and they would have snagged him." Oh, touchdown, right? I mean, like, you believed us?
Yeah.
You believed us? Suckers. We got you.
If only we were that good. If only the CIA was like it was in the movies. He would have choked on a chicken bone. His brake fluid would have drained out and he'd have been in a ditch or something. Sadly, no. We just sit by and we take it.
Yep. It's fine. And it's not like he is flaunting it all over social media. I mean, his guys were just like, there was an article written in the Diplomat. Look, maybe it's all right. Maybe everything in that article is what you should absolutely listen to. I will tell you who else is a big fan of that article in the Diplomat. Some of Sirajuddin Haqqani's guys. They were like, they tweeted that article and then wrote this kind of weird, luscious beard, his manly presence. I was like, you guys need to get a room. There's nothing wrong with that, but go to the side. We don't need to see it. And so I'm just like, is this the people that you think that you should listen to? Like Barnett Rubin? How many times do we have to listen to these people tell us that they're fine before we realize that they're not? I don't know. Forever, I guess.
Will, I think they need to order themselves a Siraj Haqqani real doll after reading some of those things. It's like you said, it's creepy as hell.
Yeah.
And Barnett Rubin, he's one of those guys who brought us Doha, who brought us negotiations, who fluffed for Sirajuddin Haqqani when he wrote his op-ed in the New York Times. I mean, what else do we expect? I mean, I would say Siraj probably isn't a threat to Barnett Rubin, but the rest of us, not so lucky.
So that's the next thing I want to talk about. All these groups that are still, you've got Haqqani, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISKP, everything at work in Afghanistan. Let's talk about what kind of threat they do pose to us right now, and we can leave out women. I keep drumming that elsewhere, but just to us in general.
As well, you should.
Yeah, that's important. It's hella important.
Yeah.
That's a technical term.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, it's important because, how often were we told, oh, the Taliban's going to moderate. They'll respect women's rights. They'll,
international
big
legitimacy.
Lie. Yeah. They have an international legitimacy. Look at, and the point about Siraj Haqqani too, before the Taliban takeover, we didn't even have a picture of the guy unless it was taking a side picture with the scarf halfway over his face. His wanted poster for Rewards for Justice was a sketch. So was his designation. And now, as Will described, he's hamming it all up and he's on Afghan media and everything. So, the threat that you mentioned, is it okay if I tackle that first, Will?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, sure.
It's
Okay.
all you.
And it's manyfold. And to me, the primary threat, there's different levels of threat. Islamic State, I'll start with Islamic State Khorasan Province, because to me, they're the immediate threat, but they're not the most significant threat. And it's hard. What frightens me, what scares me about these organizations, what keeps me up at night is patient and learning organizations, ones that can survive and thrive over long term, that plans and that, really puts thought in.
Endures.
Yes. Yeah, and exactly. That makes allies that can deal with state sponsorship like Iran,
persevere.
Al Qaeda. Yes, and it has state sponsor. It has Iran. It has the Taliban, and via the Taliban, not directly because the Pakistanis don't like them, but they are granted that safe haven because of Pakistani support of the Taliban. That's what makes them dangerous. And I always go back to, the Islamic State is a direct threat, right? Because they're it's hard to explain it this way, but they're the real red-blooded jihadists, right? They want an attack and they want their attack now. They want results. They want those images. And that is dangerous, right? Mm-hmm. Look at what happened in Moscow and look what happened, look at the plot that was just broken up here and the attacks throughout Europe. They make headlines, but are these groups a strategic threat or are they sort of a pinprick threat? I'm not trying to downplay those attacks that kill individuals that the Islamic State does. It's a danger. But Al-Qaeda's threat, we're talking about the difference between an attack like Moscow and an attack like 9/11. Mm-hmm. And I try to remind people that this is the patience of Al-Qaeda. Its first attack on the United States, 1993, First World Trade Center. 8 years before they returned. In 1998, obviously we had Kenya, Tanzania, and we had the USS Cole. In 2000, those were major attacks by Al Qaeda as well. They think in terms of decades and generations, and we think in terms of 2 and 4 year election cycles. No, and that's what makes groups like Al Qaeda excessively dangerous in my mind. They have safe haven. The Islamic State does not have safe haven. It has a presence in Afghanistan, and it can organize in small areas. But if the Taliban really put their mind to it, they could stamp them out. The Taliban have hundreds of thousands of foot soldiers who won a real war. And the Islamic State might have anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 fighters, depending on what estimates you see. And that's probably right. The Taliban has allies. It has state sponsors, Pakistan, Iran, China and Russia are playing footsie. Siraj is in UAE and very likely Qatar, right? That's where the first Doha, that's where the Doha, the Taliban's first, what they called their embassy was set up in the late 2010, early 2010s. Siraj is in Saudi Arabia. That should be frightening. I had a friend tell me that the Saudis are now looking to shed themselves of dissidents and are encouraging to go to Afghanistan. Where did we see that story? And who are they going to wind up with? They're going to wind up with the Taliban and Al Qaeda. So, yes, the Islamic State, it's dangerous, and it's done a very good job with limited resources in organizing its network in Central Asia. Note that the attack in Moscow was executed by Tajiks. The plot broken up here in the United States. All 8 were Tajiks. So they clearly tapped into a network here. Yep. But also that can be a weakness as well, right? Tajikistan it's probably the most friendly Western government in its terms of it doesn't like jihadists. It has its own threat from a Taliban movement in Tajikistan. So, those types of things, they could be mitigated. But that Al-Qaeda safe haven, its training camps and all the infrastructure I described earlier, that's what keeps me up at night.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Bill said. I couldn't say it any better. I would just say for people, one of the things about those arrests that's what worries me, because you can get through the border, and this isn't me trying to be like this political thing. I don't. That's not my thing. I'm just telling you that I have Afghans who. One guy was a colonel, a full bird colonel, I wrote about this at the Bulwark. The story's called "Sir, Do You Remember Me?" He and his 6 members of his family made it to South America and then came all the way through the United States and walked up with a letter that I wrote him and says, basically, I'm here. They handed the letter of recommendation letter that I wrote this guy, and he came all the way here, currently in Denver. And if he can do that, and I'm so happy he did, but if he can do that, others can. I'm sorry. And I know when I say stuff like this, certain friends of mine, and I love y'all, and certain people are like, why do you have to beat up on this person or this administration? I really am not. I'm just telling you, this is something that I see, and that FBI is overwhelmed. Ray's reporting. I'm thinking is it earlier this year when he testified, or late last year when he testified?
It was a couple of months ago.
Yeah, okay.
Like I want to say March or April. Yeah.
Yes, that's it. And it's just like, I mean, I'm very happy that they caught these guys. I'm waiting to see some of the more stuff that we get, because I'm sure you know this, Bill. I mean, that's going to tell us even more of how scared we should be, because we only know this much so far.
I read this, and I'm probably going to butcher the statistic and the dates, but it generally went something like this. In 2017, about 18 terrorist suspects were thought to have crossed into the United States via the borders. This year, the number is thought to be around 400. And that's what they know. What don't they know?
Right.
Who aren't they tracking? Who isn't on their radar? That's terrifying. And, they're clever, they're determined, and and you said this, they're patient. And Will, you said they know us well, and they know our weaknesses.
They have
that border
studied us.
Is a weakness. Yeah.
They've studied us so well.
I don't, that can be made into a political argument, and I could sit here and tell you everything that each administration, the Bush administration, screwed up the establishment of the Iraqi government and the Iraqi military. The Obama administration wanted a Russia surge, and the surge was the most cynical thing I witnessed in my life. The Trump administration gave us Doha, which was one of the most awful, and the second, is on par with the cynical surge. And the reason I say the surge was cynical is because more people died in those 3 or 4 years of the surge, depending on when you counted them, in Afghanistan, than the rest of the other 16 or 17 years that we were in Afghanistan. All for what? To give the Afghanistan back to the Taliban and President Biden's withdrawal. So, what does that make me? It makes me dislike bad policy.
Yes, that's exactly it. I was there. Look, I served under. Sorry, go ahead. I served under every administration, every one. I was 2006. I was in Baghdad training the Iraqi police before the surge. That was really fun. Thank you so much for that. Training people who were trying to kill me. That was a lovely experience in the summer of Baghdad. I call it the summer of love, because everybody was blowing up around me, and the Shia militants had infiltrated the Iraqi police, and they were trying to kill me and my friends. They used to take off their uniforms, and they'd say Muqtada al-Sadr, and they'd say, why do you hate him? I can tell you about, Obama in Provincial Reconstruction Team. I was like, what are we doing? We don't know what we're doing. Afghan local police in 2012. Maybe a good idea, but maybe not everywhere. That was under Obama, Trump, Doha, and Biden right at the end. They all got it wrong, and we could all go chapter and verse. And is everybody happy now? We're all to blame. All of us. We all did this. Why don't we just try to learn from it and actually try to defeat these people, instead of saying, this guy did it this time. It wasn't me. It was stupid Steve on the right-hand side. It drives me crazy, Bill. It drives me crazy.
How do we fix it? That's
I don't know.
In this political climate.
Yeah.
No, people aren't willing to talk. It's all finger pointing. If I write about Doha, I'll hear, oh, well, it was Biden's fault he withdrew. And if I write about the withdrawal and then it was Doha, and it's like, two things can be true at once. And unfortunately, people, if you pick a side, if your politics become your religion and you're unwilling to see the failures of your team, then we're never going to learn.
And look, I would just say that it's also like people haven't wrapped their minds around the fact that everybody saw us leave Afghanistan. We may have like convinced ourselves that it doesn't matter. Like, this doesn't matter. It's off in the hinterlands. But guess who saw it? Everybody else. They saw that happen. They saw our allies fall from the sky. They saw that we were relying on the Taliban to provide outer perimeter security so that we could get into our planes and take off and watch people fall from the sky. I mean, look, people, I mean, I don't know how, I hate to tell you this, but everybody else hasn't forgotten that. You might have here in this reality called the United States, but over there, people remember that and they're making calculations. So maybe, I don't know, everybody else, when you're having these allies having problems with them in Ukraine and in Israel, and they're not listening to what we're telling them. Maybe they're just a little nervous because the last people you told them how to fight a war, you skedaddled and watched them fall from the sky. If I were them, I'd be like, oh yeah, you're going to tell us how to fight this war for us, huh? Great. Here we go again. The Americans are here. They know how to fix this. I don't know. This is my thing, Bill.
No, Will.
I just wish that we would listen to our allies when they are like, this is how we can fight these guys. Could you just give us the weapons? Sure.
What did the Ukrainians say? Like, you're asking us to fight this way?
Yeah, right. We know what's better.
What land war have you been in? We've been on the front lines. Now, look, I got my issues with the Ukrainians and some of their things too, sure. But they weren't wrong about us trying to cram Western tactics on them when they don't have air defense, when they don't have close air support to accompany their mechanized assault. I mean, yeah. I think, we're the Americans and we're here to help you win a war. It's probably the worst thing our allies could hear us say.
Yeah, no, and just
it's like Reagan, right? We're with the government. We're here to help.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I mean, it's just like you have never seen us in the field, Beth.
No, no.
I was an advisor for a very long time, and some people would say I was good at it. Some people would. Now, I have worked alongside a lot of American advisors, and there's a lot of great ones. I could start naming them off, but there's way more bad ones. Way more. Way more.
Yeah.
And it's just, that has always been something that we're not that great at. Luckily, not everybody's great at it either. That's what I take comfort in at times.
I had embedded with MITS and PITS, the military transition teams and police transition teams in Iraq. And I was fortunate that every unit that I got to embed with were very solid.
That's awesome.
So I ran a bunch of Will Selvers in the field. And
awesome.
They were good at what they did, but I heard nightmare stories about units. But these tended to be the units that were in the worst of it, in Mosul, in Fallujah, in Ramadi, the places where you couldn't afford to be a bad MIT or a bad PIT. Let me
be a little bit more precise. I'm talking about the advisors that usually were at the ministerial level.
Oh, okay,
higher.
Gotcha.
I'm so sorry. Thank you for course correcting there. This is not the police transition teams, the MITs. No. I am talking about the people who are at the senior level advisors to different offices in Kabul and stuff like that. No idea, no clue, had never been in the field. They thought that Kabul was really Afghanistan. It's not.
Yeah.
That is the capital, right? It's just, it was like everybody came in and then they were like, this is what we need to do. We're going to create the Afghan National Army Civil Order Police. It will be different from this organization. So they just kept on making these new ANSF units. It was like ANASOC and this and Afghan Local Police. And, there were so many different, I couldn't keep up with them all. And I was like,
maybe they just needed infantry battalions, maybe, right. and police units. Maybe that was just it. I'll be really quick, Beth. I'm sorry if we're dominating the conversation here, but there was a video I saw a couple of years ago, and it was this woman who was talking to Afghan women about art. Does anyone remember this?
No.
And then she's talking about modern art. And, there's a British woman and there's a bunch of Afghan women in the art, like sort of in a semicircle. And she shows them up on the thing a picture of a urinal. And the urinal somehow was art. And she was asking, do you know what this is? And then everyone's like, the Afghan women never saw a urinal before. They don't know what the hell this is. And she explains to them what there is. And you see the look of horror come across the women's face. And one turns to the other and looks. And I remember once someone commenting, this is the moment we lost the war in Afghanistan. And what you described is it's exactly like, what was this person? I'll send this to you guys when we have the podcast. I got to find it. But it's so true, right? Like, who did she think she was talking to? What was the whole point of that? How many hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars were spent on this program to teach Afghan women about urinals as art? And it's like, let's just create another myriad of Afghan units so that they can take advantage of the corruption that's created out of the Byzantine structures, the bureaucratic structures that we put in front of them. It's absolutely insane. That was, I realized that story might not fit, but to me, it fits in my brain.
It fits.
Somehow.
It fits.
It does. And it's a great segue to the next thing I wanted to ask, which is, because we've put Afghan women through so much over the last 20 years, right? We raised their standard of living. We gave them this excellent access to education, and now it's all gone. And now, Will, in your latest piece at Long War Journal, you talk about the closeness to recognition in the U.S. I mean, like you said, Bill, earlier, Russia is starting to think about opening their doors to the Taliban. We've seen China and the Taliban have exchanged ambassadors, but the U.S., who said that they were going to stand by these allies, that all this stuff. Tell me about it, Will.
Okay, Bill's. I'm going to bring out the pony. Okay, and Bill's going to come over and tell me that I'm being too optimistic. I can feel it coming. Maybe, just maybe, it won't happen before the election, but it's gonna happen. I don't know if it'll happen before the election because I mean, maybe they just think that nobody will care, and maybe that's the right calculation. If you have decided, look, I don't like this choice, but if you have decided that, like, I need to recognize the Taliban, do I take the penalty now and take the hit? Or do I just hold with what I have and I try to win the election and then we do it? I don't know. I think that, it depends. But that's what they're going to do. Yes. So, you don't let anybody out like that without thinking down the road that this is something that's going to happen. I don't know. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, I think I think that's about right, Will. It's really hard to predict these things. Yeah. I honestly, I could flip a coin on that one, or shake the magic 8 ball. It could be anything.
But once they do that, now you're recognizing them, and it's going to be all the different things down the road.
Yeah, one thing to add, it seems to me like everyone's waiting for the first person to blink here. The first one to throw in and say yes, and once that happens, then Pakistan will do it, and then the UAE do it, or if it's UAE or Pakistan won't do it, but as soon as the dam breaks, I think then at that, and it could be this year, it could be next month, it could be next year, it could be 5 years, and I go back to that. You sent that to me, Will, I believe it was Siraj's statement. Mm-hmm. Where he's like, we have our legitimacy. We don't need it. We don't want it from you. We have what we need. So I think the Taliban are just fine where they are. And if they get the recognition, it's merely the cherry on top.
Mm-hmm. But I just can't even imagine. And what was the latest UN saying that, the ICC needs to examine crimes against humanity. And now they're talking about gender apartheid being a thing. And it's like in that realm, with those things going on and this momentum finally building up, how dare we?
So here, let me give you talked about, let me give you one of my favorites when I tell this story, it really pisses people off. So I'll just serve it up for you. So because we're talking about the women of Afghanistan, right? So there's about 3,400, take a few, Afghan women in the ANSF. So different units, police, Afghan Air Force. There was Afghan Air Force female pilots. There was ANISOC. Some of them were great. Some of them okay, just like everything else in life. So one of the things that we decided that we should be doing is, even in the last months of the war, is to beat up the Afghans because they haven't increased the amount of women in their quotas for the next year, right? This is a true statement. I remember sitting in the conversations with like, no, well, you guys need to get the participation level. It was called some type of funding mechanism. I don't even remember. And at the very same time, you're having Afghan women Air Force pilots telling us that this is not going well. This is not going well. And we're telling them, oh, it's okay. We won't forget about you. There are over 3,000 Afghan women that were in the security forces. At the last few months before the fall, Ashraf Ghani decided to name female deputy provincial governors around the country. He did that as a nod to us to stay. Hey, look, we're going to do this, deputy. So all these brave women, all of them stepped forward and I'll do it. We got some. A lot of them didn't make it on that plane. A lot of them are dead.
Mm-hmm. Well, and how many of them, because that would have been the AAA would have allowed women in many of those units to be included in the SIV program, correct?
Yeah, there was
that either. So
yeah, that is the part when I talk about Afghanistan that is just it breaks your heart. And because I was there and I was just like, why are we talking to them about this? There's another one, right? Here's one. There's an Afghan helicopter pilot who was trying to get out, and he had somebody in the United States. I don't remember all the details, but the embassy was trying to put a halt on it because we needed him in the field. So we were fighting his case. They were fighting the case, and then we left. I hope he made it out, but it's a good thing that we kept him from leaving because we needed him in the field to not give them the ammunition they needed. Anyways.
The irony in all of that is the people we needed there the most were the ones who were the most, in the most danger. But, again, Will, you had mentioned, right? The world watched us abandon those allies. And how could you trust us? I hear people like talking about, well, we need to partner with a country, to help set up a resistance movement, and how are we going to do, and, the problem is who's going to work with us, right? I mean, obviously Iran and Pakistan, that's not happening. Uzbekistan really doesn't want to antagonize. Their only country really is Tajikistan. And if you're the Tajiks, do you put your neck out on the line when you watch the U.S. walk away from Iraq and leave Iraq to the predations of Iran, and then walk away from Afghanistan and literally leave your allies, people that you said you would protect, that you would bring, that you would get out, that you would stay there with them, in thick or thin? We had a security agreement with them, and we just abandoned. And why would anyone partner with us in Afghanistan, or frankly anywhere? And this is why these lessons need to be learned.
Bill, I want you to everybody. I have a podcast. It's called Stories from My Brothers, Tales of the Afghan Security Forces. And I highly recommend the most recent one, okay? There's a man that comes on. His name is Nakeem Mirzada. He is the third Afghan to ever graduate from West Point, earned his Ranger Tab, Air Assault, Basic Infantry Officer School, graduated. He spent like 5 or 6 years in the United States away from his family, went all the way over there. Came back, rose through, smart. Oh, God, so smart. And his words, and I heard Bill in the back, see, I told you, Will, is that he said, here's the thing. You didn't need the Doha Agreement. You could have just left. Because you remember in the 13, 14, when you lowered the amount of troops, 90,000 of you left, and we didn't fall apart. It was the poison pill that you made us swallow that killed us. And I was like, it was cold. And you know what? He's absolutely right. Absolutely right.
So I want to ask one more question to you guys before we close out. I know we could go over. I know you guys could.
We're not going to record like an 8-hour podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? No,
the best hits.
I'm in. I mean, if we can.
I mean, I'll leave it going. You guys can keep going if you want. So at Ibrahim Raisi's funeral, right? We saw Hamas and the Taliban there, and it got me to thinking, because I've been writing a lot about Iranian proxies of late. What is it that makes the Taliban not an Iranian proxy, or are they? And I just wanted to discuss that with some people who are very intelligent and well-versed on these issues.
Yeah, I'll start on that. Is that okay, Will? Yeah,
please.
And, I wouldn't describe them as a proxy. Proxy would be a group that Iran controls, right? Or any government, right? That would be the Iraqi militias. The Houthis are moving into that field, but the Hezbollah, obviously. But the Taliban still has agency. It still does it, but I would describe them as allies. And strong allies. And we were able to prove this in court. And I testified in a case called Cabrera versus Iran. This was a case where the families of American soldiers who were killed in Afghanistan, or soldiers who were wounded, or American civilians, they sued Iran for its support of both the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. And we won that case. I was the first witness in that case, and I wrote a ridiculously long testimony on that. And it was in federal court, and we were able to prove that. And a lot of this was declassified documents from the U.S. military and State Department. Will, you would know some of the names we came across in these information that Iran was providing safe haven, training, weapons, and cash for the Taliban, and not just the Taliban, but Al Qaeda. And the reasons are very simple. Iran hates America and doesn't want America on its border. So Iran did whatever, it couldn't create proxies. There's not a lot of Shia who were willing to throw in with the Iranian, the Hazara, wary of the Iranians in many ways. And they just aren't strong enough to eject the United States. And they would also be a threat to the Taliban if they did arm. So the Iranians went with the Taliban, and they built a very strong relationship. We tracked networks all the way to the heart of Kabul, the Kabul attack network. The Iranians were providing funding. Now, things have changed a bit since the withdrawal, but Iran does not want to see the United States or the West return to Afghanistan. The Taliban are acceptable to them. They made a good investment. Sure, they might have disagreements over time, a water dispute. I remember people, getting into a hissy about that one a year ago, and I sat back and I did one of those things. I'm like, this isn't going to end the way everyone's like, they're going to go to war. And I'm like, this is what they call.
And you're like, man, they do this.
This is what they call negotiations in this part of the world.
That's exactly right.
They do it with the Pakistanis and the Iranians do it. The Pakistanis and the Afghans.
When they exchanged fight, right? Was it earlier this year when the Pakistanis, launched a couple here, the Iranians hit back. All right.
Everyone's going, the relationship's over. I'm going, listen, Pakistan invested a lot into strategic depth into Afghanistan. That's strategic depth is a theory that Afghanistan is the withdrawal point for the Pakistanis in case of war with India. They're not giving up these relationships. They're relationships that have been forged in fire over decades. So I would say, proxy's a strong word, and it's really technical, but what you're saying is correct. They're allies, they're fellow travelers, they're anti-West, they're anti-American. They're willing to join hands in the fight against the United States, and that's exactly how the Iranians supported the Taliban. Were the Iranians the Pakistanis? Certainly not to that level, but it was significant, and it helped the Taliban win. It also geographically, it allowed the Taliban to take shelter and to attack not just from the east, but from the west as well.
Absolutely. What about the Al-Qaeda relationship? I mean, especially if you've got the leader in Iran right now. What does that mean?
So in 2000, I believe it was 2009, the State Department outlined this is their words, not mine, quote, the secret deal between Iran and Al Qaeda. And basically, the deal is we'll allow your leaders to operate from here. Iran allows Al Qaeda leaders to have safe harbor in Iran, and occasionally leave the country, usually to go to Afghanistan or Iraq, and they'll allow them to transit. They'll give them IDs and things like that. And Al Qaeda would do two things. And again, this isn't a proxy relationship, but more of an alliance. And again, that's been forged over 2 decades now. That the Al Qaeda wouldn't conduct attacks inside of Iran and wouldn't attack Iranian interests. And also the added effect that Al Qaeda would be a thorn in the side of the United States and the West. So that's a win-win for both of these. And that, again, we also proved that in court of law as well, in federal court. Look, these are things that we know, and then there's things you could prove. And that one we proved in a court of law. And I'm very proud of that work.
You should be.
But it's important. It's important. People will say the Sunni and the Shia, they can never cooperate. I hate to tell people that Hamas is a Sunni organization and Iran is a Shia organization, and yet they cooperate. And Al Qaeda is a Sunni organization, and the Taliban is a Sunni organization, and they cooperate with Iran. Iran has a very big tent theory. They always have. I mean, They have a street named after of Muhammad Islambuli, who was the assassin of Anwar Sadat. He's a Sunni who killed a Sunni. But Iran has always tried to pull everyone together, or at least be a supportive of them. Their hope is that they can establish a greater Islamic world. Al Qaeda wants it their way, and the Islamic State really wants it just their way. But at the end of the day, they're fellow travelers.
It's exactly it. That's the best heuristic I've heard. I mean, they fight each other in that valley that one time that year. That's great. And they killed each other then. But you know what they're good at? There's some things that we can't do somehow. I don't understand it. Put aside our petty differences and be like, okay, fine. But here's the bad guys. Here's the people that we both want to go after. Why don't we do it? They're very good at just getting along at certain points to get along. Yeah. And, if at certain point in time down the road, they're winning and they have a chance to kill one of these guys, they'll do it. They'll take their time. They're patient people. However long it'll take, they know that we keep on forgetting because we don't have an attention span any longer. And so they're just I'm just going to keep on coming. And eventually you'll forget what you said about me a couple of weeks ago.
I call it McWar. We want to go through the drive-through, get our victory, pull out, throw the wrapper in the road, eat it while we're driving, throw the wrapper in the road, and go home and take a nap. And meanwhile, our enemies are going to 10-course meal at an expensive French restaurant, and they're taking their time and they're savoring their meal.
It's
so accurate. That's
Yeah, McWar, we're not good at McWar. It's really not the way we win it. What did everyone tell us last year? Ukraine was going to, we were supposed to believe that McWar story. They were going to sever the land bridge and drive the Russians out of the Crimea. I'm sorry, I never put stars on my shoulder, but I figured that one out from my basement.
Hey, look, this is what Bill just didn't understand, is that we tried to tell the Ukrainians how to fight that war, and if they would have listened, everything would have been fine. Mm-hmm. It's their fault. And I'm pointing to the Washington Post, they did this whole series about what went wrong, and it was just when I read that, I was like, take out Ukraine, put it in Afghanistan. It's the same story. Yeah. Just name the characters are a little different. Yeah. It's the same thing. I'm like, here we go again. Great.
Yeah. That's perfectly right, Will. I couldn't agree more. We are the Americans. We're here to help you win a war. My advice, don't listen.
Please. Or, hey, you know what? If you don't agree with us, go down to South Vietnam and ask how those people are doing. Yeah. I spent 5 days down there about 5 years ago. And one guy, when he was driving me around, I was like, man, this place is great. True story. Well, yeah, I wish you would have stayed.
Yeah. We've got a good history of abandoning our allies.
We
when they
do.
need us the most.
Mhm.
It's depressing.
It is.
You know what the sad thing is, Will? Is there's no dearth in people who are willing to see it through, to sacrifice, to see it through. It's not our will. It's not your will, my
No.
will, or Beth's will. It's the will of our so-called betters, our elected leaders, our generals, our admirals. They don't know what they have. They don't know how to tap what they have because I don't think they have the fortitude.
Because it's always more
to see
important
through
to
hard
make
times.
it's always more important to make it to the next meritocratic step in your evolutionary ladder to greatness.
There's a board position I need to get to and a golf course I need to get to and an election I need to win.
I just wanted to. Here's the thing, Bill, and I think I know you feel the same. I'm sorry, Beth, but like I think all of us, all three of us, right? All three of us, we just wanted to win.
Yeah. That's
I
it.
just wanted to win.
Yeah.
That's all. I didn't care about any of the rest. I was like, here's my OPR. Here's the PowerPoint briefings that you must give. I have to go to this school. I have to go to that school. How about I just like learn this and fight this war? But it was like, well, Will, this is a true story. I was a lieutenant colonel, and they were trying to clear the road for me, right, to like go up and be whatever the next great thing. And I wanted to go back to Afghanistan for the final year because I was worried about what was going to happen. And multiple 06s told me, if you do that, it's going to ruin your career. You need to like go to the Pentagon. You need to get a job, and so people can know you. And so then when you get to go to the war college, that you will be, nobody, this is the story of my life. Nobody knows who you are. I'm like, so let me get this straight. Maybe that says something about us. That me wanting to go for my sixth time with over 4 years in theater, that I'm willing to do a job that is actually rated below me, but I know that I can do that job really well. As a major billet, I applied when I was a major. I got in as an 05. I didn't care. You think I cared? I got to fight the war. But like, it was never about that. And it broke my heart over and over again. I was just like, who cares about like, what are we doing? What is this? Like, why don't we focus on winning this war and then we can go do whatever it is you want to do? I'll leave because I just signed up for this one. But we just kept on going. It's just, I don't know. I could go on and on for this.
It shows how unserious we are, right? We have a peacetime process for promotion while we're at war. I mean, someone like you should have risen to the top because you were willing, because you were asking to go back to Afghanistan, but that wasn't a measure of success. The measure of success was here's a process that we followed and you're not following it. So, hey, I want to say one quick thing before we talked about hope, right? And, hopeful. The only thing I'm hopeful these days, I mean, I guess I've just become really jaded. I didn't quit a job that I was well paying while I was starting a family and going in bed and, take the risk to start a business and all the difficulties and the late nights and, time walking away from things because some nasty terrorist blew something up on Christmas Day or something to lose wars. Right. And, and yet I didn't take this job to document failure. But, and one of the things that really is frustrating for me is like, the only thing I hope I am these days is wrong. I mean, I hope I'm wrong that Al Qaeda doesn't launch attacks from Afghanistan, use its infrastructure, or I hope that we don't recognize the Taliban. And but sadly, I fear, if past is any indicator, I'm going to continue to be right, and it just doesn't leave me with much hope these days. But
hey,
I got a job to do.
Hey,
But I mean,
what? Yeah, I
go
tell
back.
people that we lost the war. Try being in the United States military. So I spent 3 years after Afghanistan in the active duty military. Look, small corner of a huge DOD. So I was the only person I ever saw who stepped forward in uniform to ever just say like, yeah, we lost that war. because we refuse to say it. And the tragedy of that is just so multiple, because you're not acknowledging what all your troops see, that we lost that war. And for you not to say it out loud and be like, we lost this war. We did. As an officer, I lost this war. I should be held accountable. Not because it's all my fault, but because that is the position that you decided to go for. And it's not personal. These general officers, I couldn't do their job. Great. I agree. You're much better at this than me. But like at the end of the day, you didn't perform. And like, you need to be held accountable, because if we can't admit that we lost a war, you cannot expect America's families to be like, let me give you my sons and daughters, my treasures. How dare we? It's just unbelievable. That's what hurts me, because I did Hero's Journey this weekend. I went with a Scott Mann's organization, and we taught storytelling, and you could see the pain that these wars have caused to generations of Americans. And out in the, not in the fancy boardrooms with, all the great degrees and all the right connections. It's these people that signed up, and they don't understand why Sarah June Haqqani is traveling. And don't think they don't know, because they do know. They don't understand why their sons and daughters fought and died in Afghanistan if we're just going to make peace with the people that killed my son. I had that conversation this weekend with a Gold Star mother who looked at me in the face and said, I don't understand why my son died. I don't understand, and I never will. And I have to tell her on behalf of an organization that I gave my life for. And I tell her this, and I said, we made a mistake. And I'm here on behalf of that DOD to tell you that we made a mistake and we should have done better. Right? I mean, that's what we owe our service members. We owe them the truth, because they're willing to fight and die for us. So when we lose a war and you just don't admit it and you blame the Afghans, you're putting these people's lives at risk. You are. Because they're not going to learn anything. And we're going to make the same mistakes over and over again. It's just very sad on so many levels, because there's been so much hurt from these wars. And that's what I talk about a lot too. Like at the personal level, we can talk about all these guys and it's important stuff. But how dare these people tell me that well, Will, you should, hey, all right. I'm like, what? Maybe you shouldn't be so angry. I'm like, no, I should be angry. I'm having a normal reaction.
Maybe you should be more angry.
Right. This is what I tell people. I go, I'm having a perfectly normal reaction, me, Will Selber, to the fact that Sarah June Haqqani is out in the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Yeah, I'm mad. What's wrong with you? Mm-hmm. Because shouldn't you be upset by this? He killed 2,000 Americans, your sons and daughters, and our allies. And it's just like a
shoulders.
That's what I was going to go back to, is how many of the years of this war that you guys were working, that I was working, did you not really get to talk about what you were doing with the people around you, because they didn't know and they didn't care. And we got to fight this war without people knowing and caring, except the ones who were involved. And it was a very small population that was involved. And that's how I always felt about it, is that our country as a whole was not really as invested in that. And it made it very easy to just kind of do a little bit. And it's
the all-volunteer force was a mistake.
Will, you reading? I was gonna comment. These wars had made me believe in the draft, and I would never have believed that 20, 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. We need a draft because America isn't paying the prices. Select families, military families that historically, whose sons and daughters and fathers and grandfathers, those are the ones who pay the price. And if we're going to fight calamitous wars such as these, maybe a nice cross section of America should be paying the price. Maybe we would think twice about getting involved with them and mismanaging them.
Exactly. There would be a price to pay. There would be a price to pay because you know who I love it. I don't know if you saw Bill, an Israeli commander. I forgot the guy who it is, like a 2-star, one of the core commanders. I don't remember his name. He resigned and said that I had failed in the run up to the war. And I was like, oh my God, what does that feel like? I wish I could have seen something like that.
Yeah. Look, post 9/11, right after 9/11, Will, who resigned after the intelligence failures? No one. In India, after Mumbai, after Lashkar-e-Taiba launched those attacks, you had, I believe it was their interior minister and another security official resign. Are you going to tell me that the Indians have more accountabilities than us in America? Clearly they do. And, maybe we should take stock of that. We should have known right after 9/11 that Tenet or the head of the FBI or, that someone needed to take the bullet. You know what happened? They got rewards. They got presidential medals. Yeah. Oh, but this is only Biden or this is only Trump or this is only Obama. It started at the beginning. We should have seen this coming.
Yeah, it's the all volunteer force has created some great Americans, and I love them. I mean, you want to feel inspired, ladies and gentlemen? You want to feel inspired? Come and hang out with the troops from all walks of life. That's just it lifts my spirits.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I was
when you lose a war, and you don't say it, are you really going to come up and be like, we don't know why people aren't signing up?
Right.
It's amazing. I was there the last 2 years, and people were like, we're in a recruiting crisis. I'm like, and I was on a panel. I said, not a small one. And they're like, the recruiting crisis, and it came to me, and I said, I think the recruiting crisis is going on because we lost the war in Afghanistan, and the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and blah, blah, blah humiliated us on the world stage. I said a speech at Air University while in uniform. Lieutenant Colonel stand up, and I said, we lost this war. And I made that pitch in uniform. I wrote about this in uniform because somebody has to, not because I'm brave, but because this is what leadership is. We have forgotten who we are. We are also the generals of Billy Mitchell, who lost it all to prove that air power was great, who went to jail, who got everything thrown at him to prove a point that the people didn't want to hear. I mean, you have to be willing to throw down your rank and be like, that's it.
Two quick points, Beth. I apologize.
You can't
Will, you
don't get in the game.
You had said, it's the best people to be around. When I went and did embeds, I said to my friends, what was that like? I was like, it was like my second childhood. I mean, and you're out in the sand and whatever. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, I was out with my brothers and sisters again. I was embedded I was like, I got to be, when I would go, because I'm embedded as a reporter, man, you get this, whatever. Hey, what do you need me to carry while we're on patrol? Give me the ammo, give me the breech gun, give me whatever is burdening you. I'll put it on my back. And they earn the respect. And then it was like, then I was home again. And, the second point, I couldn't agree with you more. It's just the bad, I was with Marines, with soldiers, even the Iraqi army guys I was with, it just was. And the Iraqis fought, man. The Iraqis I was with, they fought. They hated Al-Qaeda. I was in Mosul when the Chaldean bishop was kidnapped by Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And they were out 24 hours a day. They exhausted me. I never saw Iraqis work like that. Anyway, it's uplifting to be with them. And the other thing you mentioned, someone needed to throw their stars on the table when the withdrawal was announced and the plan for withdrawal was announced, but there's no courage. What you talked about, right? That shouldn't be courage. That should just be a matter of course. We should be. I gave a speech at CENTCOM this spring, and the first thing I opened with was, "We lost the war in Afghanistan," and half the room went pale. I mean, about a quarter of them gasped, and the other quarter were people who knew exactly what I was talking about. Right? These were my people in the room. And then I went through my thing, and afterwards, a couple of people.
I love it. It's my favorite thing to tell people.
Never thought of it that way. You know, we did lose that war, and it just was like, it took me to tell you that this is insane. There was nothing brilliant or eye opening about what I said, but clearly no one was willing to say it to them, and I.
I did it this year, like my last time at Air University, the language ALURIC. It's a symposium down in Maxwell Air Force Base, and I went and did a speech. I was in service dress, full, and the first thing out of my mouth was, and I gave him my whole resume, and I said, "I'm giving you this resume because I say this out of love. We lost the war in Afghanistan, and the Taliban and Al Qaeda and blah 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 humiliated us. I don't want to say that. I don't like saying that. What I want to say is we kicked their asses and we killed those guys, and we don't have to worry about them."
How can there be accountability if we can't admit
that's
that we
what
lost
I
this
would
war?
love to say. I don't want to say these things, but we
impossible.
lost the war, and until we do say those things, all the rest of it can't happen, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Can't do it. Can't do it.
Well, and all these ancillary events, all these second order, third order things, they all come from that. And we can't even talk about those because we can't talk about the first thing. And so that's just to bring it full circle again. Like this is going to continue to be problematic for us until we can.
Yeah, we can't fix a problem if we can't admit we have one. And that's where we've been since this war began, I guess.
Huge problem.
I look back on it now, and it seems so clear that we weren't serious from the get-go.
That's exactly right. Yep. See, so Bill knew way before me, right? I still believed in us. This is the key difference because Bill saw it. I saw it, but I was like, okay, we're going to figure this out. Okay, it's okay. I'm going to go back. Look, I went back in 2020. I hadn't been in a combat zone. I was in Korea. That doesn't count in my opinion. I hadn't been in a combat zone in like 4 or 5 years. But I had to go back because I was like, oh my God, we might leave. And I was like, I got to go back. And like, when I went back, nothing really had changed. We hadn't learned anything. I was just amazed at our level of incompetence. One of the Americans, I'm sure he's a great guy. I'm sure. He was in charge of our negotiations. Looked up at this very famous sign on the hill at Kabul that reads Afghanistan, right? It's very well known.
Yeah.
He walked outside and he goes, huh, what's that? What does that mean? I'm like, you're in charge of the negotiations? Oh, God. Who are we sending?
We should have sent Bill and Will. And
then I was like, even when I left, I wrote my first article, right, for the Bulwark. It said, do not forget Afghanistan. I wrote it 3 days after I came back from Afghanistan. And I called my shot and I said, this is going to be bad. And we need to start getting ready for it if we're really going to leave. And we need to start getting all of our allies out. Not just the SIVs. I said this many times. If we're going to do this, let's bring out our people because they've earned that at least. And it didn't happen. And that's when I was like, I'm done. And that was me getting, I was like, I'm done. Retirement, I'm out.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, I just couldn't look at myself in the mirror anymore. And in that uniform that I love to wear. I love to wear my uniform. I was proud of it, man. For the first time in my life, I said, I don't believe. And if you don't believe, you should get out.
Yeah.
And I did.
Yeah.
You know? And I was like, I don't believe anymore. It's time for me to leave. You need to have people here who believe. And I can't sell you that no more. I'm so sorry. No, sir. No, sir.
It's the whole moral injury aspect of this
100%.
that is so painful to the people who really did understand and work so hard and care so much and try to raise awareness, you know, and who still care, who don't, even for all the jaded whatever, like, I know that
I'm going to give you a little hope, though.
Either of you. It's like,
why don't we end it with a little hope? I'm going to end with a little hope. And I know Bill's going to, don't let Bill talk after me, okay? Because Bill's going to come back and be like, Will. Here's a little hope. The Taliban, these people, they're not 10 feet tall. We've just created that in our little minds. We think that they're these like mysterious people who like, no, we can defeat them. We have friends who are willing to become real counterterrorism partners in Afghanistan.
Nor should they.
They're gentlemen like Sami Sadat, you know, National Resistance Front, Afghan Freedom Front led by Yasin Zia. Like, hey, he's like, oh no, here we go again. Don't worry. They don't want you to be involved that much. You've done this once before. Yeah, exactly. Do you think that Sami Sadat and Yasin Zia and like, you know, Ahmad Shah Massoud Jr. are like, what we really want is the Americans to be on the ground with us. No, they don't want that. Thank you very much. But their support,
no,
it's there.
I
I
actually agree with you, and I also have hope
in
and
that
faith
country.
in people,
and they're willing to fight for it.
With you, Beth, with you, Will.
But you know what that would require?
You know, all the people I talk to
say we were wrong.
Never get to, you know, their
right.
names get to
and
see
it's
the
not too late to
CIA
do the right
and state.
That's my hope, baby. Come on,
you know, DIA,
come on, Bill.
There are good people there. We need leadership. If we have the right leadership, if we could somehow overcome this, I don't have hope that we're going to have that in the next 4 years, but who knows, right? Something can change. But I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't continue to do this if I didn't have a ray of hope. And what I witnessed after the withdrawal, with all the horror that was that withdrawal, watching Americans, watching everyone cast it, you know, caution to the wind, and just say, you know, people on active duty, people working at CIA and at state and at the FBI saying, I don't care. I don't care if I get fired. I don't care if I get thrown in jail. I'm helping people that I know and love and care for get out of Afghanistan. My career be damned. And I still go back to that. And there is a lot to be hopeful. It's hard. This is a tough business. And I've seen a lot. And yes, I'm jaded when it comes to, but you know, like, and you're right. People like Sam, I know Sammy a little. I got to spend a little bit of time with him. I testified alongside him in Congress. Afghanistan needs a lot of Sammys, and they just need some. Again, we don't need American boots on the ground. As you said it right, Will. Just give them the support they need, and let them do it. And which is what we should have done long ago.
Let them fight. Let them fight their own wars. Yes. Listen to them. They know these people. You know why? They grew up with them. It's that easy for people to. That's it. That's the secret sauce. I keep on telling people that. Like, how do you know Afghanistan so well? How do you know? I'm like, so when I get there, I just, you know, I meet an Afghan and I ask him questions and they tell me things and I listen to them and I try to remember them and I write them down and I try to learn from them. It's just not that hard. It's just admit that you don't know, and that, yeah, what can I do to help you? I don't know a lot. I can give you some money if you need it, but like, we made the Afghan intelligence service. This is a true thing. We made the Afghan intelligence service in 2014, 15 on my 5th deployment. I was an advisor to a senior Afghan general. We made them do a summer conference where we brought all the provincial intelligence officers back to Kabul so we could synchronize during the fighting season. And I tried to fight this. I was like, don't do this. Just don't do it. Don't bring these people back here.
We know
like
better.
Some of them won't go back. Some of them are going to get killed in the process. There's absolutely no reason to bring these gentlemen out from the provinces to do a court things right now. They need to be out in the field. Will. They brought them out, and they had the little conference, and they placated us with the speeches. And then 3 of them were killed on their way home. We got you.
Get out of their way.
Well, that was a
Boom
on hope sandwich.
I know, right? Damn.
Wow.
I gotta end it on something upbeat. The Afghans, listen to your allies. That's my biggest. Listen to them. Listen to them when they tell you how these people operate in their terrain. Listen to them and provide as much support as you can to them. That is really it. Get out of their way. Get out of their way.
I love it. Well, I always learn so much anytime that you guys are talking. And so having both of you together,
thank you, Beth. Always a pleasure.
Hour and 37 minutes that I have.
It was great. Always great to talk with you. Thanks for giving us the time too.
I thought this was going to go one way, and it went a lot of different ways, and ended up being maybe one of my favorite episodes of why it all continues to matter. I want to say thank you to all the listeners for sharing your time, for supporting the people of Afghanistan, for caring, because that is such a big component of this. Tasha Kaur, hope to see you again soon.